Thank you, Tug-of-War, coaches, ladies and gentlemen. It's a real, absolute honor to be here. It took a while to get here, almost 40 hours from Paul, but it's a tremendous honor, and it's certainly the biggest coaching conference I've ever had the honor of speaking at. See it, believe it, achieve it. That's what we're talking about today. And for me, it's about setting that expectation. You get what you expect in life. So why not expect something incredible? My favorite quote from my all-time favorite martial artist, Morihei Uchiba, he said, "Man is like iron. When iron is taken out of the ground, it's full of impurities. It's like dirt. But through constant forging, it's transformed into a razor-sharp sword." And so it is with the journey of all our lives. And so it is the journey of coaching, is to transform that child or whoever we coach literally from dirt to a razor-sharp sword. And that's the journey of coaching. I've coached a lot of people and been involved in many different sports in my career. I'm going to go through those quickly, but I'm here this morning specifically to tell about one story, about one athlete that I had the pleasure of working with, and something that he went on to do which was unimaginable. And there was only less than a handful of people in the world that believed that he could do it. Less than one hand. But you know, that's all that's needed. And as a coach, I cannot overstate the importance of whatever you believe in those who you work with is actually what they are going to achieve. Your belief is what they are going to achieve. This is an incredible story. The great Guardian writer Don McGrath said, "This is the sporting story of the year for 2016. He missed the gold medal by 1 centimeter. This year, he's gone on, should I say, in 2017, he's become world champion. He's jumped, the only athlete in the world to jump more than 8.6 meters 4 times into 1 year, not even the great Carl Lewis. And if he stays on target, if he stays doing what he's supposed to do, he can be the first athlete to ever to jump more than 9 meters. In case you're wondering what 9 meters looks like, let's have a look. All the ways to Pat Daly. That's what 9 meters look like. And he has the potential to do that. So I'm going to tell you a bit about, I was born in West Waterford. I was born in a place called Knockenour. And just if you need a pen for it, if you're wondering where it is, it's about 9 miles from everywhere. All these towns had a significant bearing on me as I grew up. My family now live in the parish of Tallow. I went to school in Cappoquin. That's where I started rowing. Also went to school in Lismore. And you'll know what I mean, was the big town near where I lived. It was like, that was the real day out to go there. So that's where I'm from. Born as well in a family steeped in the GAA culture. That's my father. He was a founding member of the Shamrocks Hurling and Football Club. That's a photograph from 1953. It's also an uncle of mine here, and many. So I was born into that tradition. I played it myself, not at a super high level, but I definitely did play it. I definitely do know the game inside out. Rowing was to be my sport. I went to school in Cappoquin, and I got cajoled into going rowing, and that was to be my thing. And I ended up rowing for Ireland. I ended up traveling the world with it. Sport became my ticket. Sport became my way of expressing myself. And in the same way for you, it becomes your way of changing yourself and working with the people around you and changing them. So that's what it became for me. Went on to win a silver medal in the Mexican Grand Prix. That's my brother Oshin receiving the medal alongside me. Both of us made the 4, 2 McGraths in the 4, so that was caused quite a bit of friction and a lot of arguments. It was very parochial. When you're sitting that close to each other under that amount of tension, tempers fray quite regularly between brothers, but I mean, I wouldn't have it any other way. I got injured in rowing. I'm going to come back to that later because there's a lot of these stories happened in around the same time. After rowing, I got a scholarship to WIT. I did my coaching there, and I met Tony Brown one day, and he convinced me to come to Mount Zion. I was a bit reluctant at the beginning, but it was one of the greatest things that I ever did, and it led me on an incredible journey into hurling with an exceptional, what is my club now, it still is and always will be, and a journey with them at that time that led us to incredible things. That's Mount Zion. You can see the Mount Zion player is just about to catch the ball against our nemesis Ballygunner team. It was an incredible era to be involved in sport, to be involved with these. Waterford at the time was emerging and coming through, and having a martial arts background, having a degree in sport, having been involved in rowing, and having a plan, a determination in my own mind to be involved with these guys as a strength and conditioning coach, and to the legends of the game. You had Brian Flannery, Brian Green, you had Tony Brown, Owen McGrath, Ken McGrath, all playing in the one team. And it was a real honor to work with guys like that and to facilitate them by giving them an engine, by providing them with the engine to be able to go and express themselves in the marvelous way that they played hurling at that time in Waterford. It was an exceptional time to be there and to watch them and to be many things. When you coach people, not only do you teach them, but you learn a lot as well from the people that you work with along the journey. We won the Munster Club in, I think it was 2004. We won the Munster Club. We won the county 3 times in a row. That's with some other characters from Waterford as well. The great John Milan and Owen Kelly and Jim Green, who was the coach at Mount Zion in that epic time. As you heard earlier on, martial arts was also an incredible journey. I actually went into martial arts to try and rehab my back, to get extra flexibility and mobility. Never quite got it to the degree that I could row again, but it led me down on a journey of martial arts. It led me to the Philippines, where I slept in an island called Hanigaran, where I learned from the founder of Kambatan. It led me to work with Jihan Jay, Bruce Lee's coach, who starred in the movie Game of Death with Bruce Lee. It led me to work with kickboxing, with karate, and through that, that there is quite a bit of conditioning, strength and conditioning, and quite a bit of the mental approach. Believing that you can is a very important aspect of martial arts. You've got to believe if you're breaking a piece of timber, it's either your hand or the timber gets it. I also became fascinated by a group of men who trained about 100 years ago, maybe 123 years ago, who were circus performers, vaudevillian strongmen who performed in places like New York. I flew to New York in the early 2000s and I started researching, and I found a guy. His name was Joe Rolino. He was 104 years old, and he started coaching me. And I learned about training methods of how these great men performed feats of strength. From a guy who performed with Harry Houdini. That was the lineage. And I always believe if you must go, they say in martial arts, if you spend a year looking for the coach, it's the best year in the martial arts journey. And that's in the world that we live in a world now that there's too much information. The information is everywhere, but it's not necessarily correct. So spending time to find we've got a coach coming on here after me who's a legend in coaching. I've wanted to meet this guy all my life. I've followed his programs with 15, 20 years. We're very lucky to have him coming up afterwards. So following the right people is absolutely critical. So I started performing these feats of strength. That's a steel bar. That's from Coney Island. Bending a steel bar through your teeth is one of the most unpleasant experiences imaginable. But if you're to be able to do something exceptional, you've got to be able to pay the price. You've got to go somewhere where other people won't go with your mind if you're to do incredible things. So I've still followed that journey to this day. I'm still performing feats of strength. I broke a world record in New York in last October where I bent 7 reinforced steel bars in 1 minute. One of them is considered to be a world-class achievement. I'm going to show you a clip just now where I put a 6-inch nail through a 3-inch piece of wood, hard timber, with my bare hand. These are the kind of things that I do. These are the ways I test myself. Enjoy. Yeah, that was my first time. That was just in around 3 inches. I'm going to call it close to 3. It was very close to 3 inches. That is a mental space that you have to get in. That is, some of the feats are quite strength orientated, and more of them are like extremely technical and mental. And the mood you have to get in to do that, I'm sure you could see it on my face. And what I had to do I put my entire life on the line in that particular one feat. I put everything that my life stands for into that one feat. Everything I gather in and bring into me to do that one thing, because to drive a 6-inch nail to 3 inches of hard wood that's something, it's hectic. And the doubt and the fear that you have before you do it, because none of us wants to absorb that kind of pain. If the nail doesn't go through, it's really, really sore in your hand. It can damage you. But it's about, if that symbolizes anything, it's overcoming doubt and fear. When I drive that, when I go one, and even on the second one, I'm doubting, and everything, there's a war. It's got like the war inside your mind, the war of fear, the war of doubt. Or are we on the front foot? And today I got on the front foot with that. I pushed that back another fraction in my mind, and from there, I'm going to do other things. I believe nothing's impossible. I'm almost 50 years old. I believe I'm going to be stronger at 60 than what I am at 50. I believe that. Because I believe it, I will be. And I will be. That's my expectation, that I will be. And because that expectation is set, everything that I do is geared towards that for the next years of my life. I believe that with everything that's inside me, that I will be. I moved to South Africa in 2009, and my first job there was to work with a school in South Africa called Paarlgym. Paarlgym is a famous rugby school in South Africa, produced players such as Skalk Burger, John de Villiers, South African captain Handré Pollard, current, where are we going? Sorry, guys. Sorry, I need to go forward again. Handré Pollard, current South African out-half, also played in that team. That was a great journey. That's my son, Sean McGrath, here. We had an unbelievable journey. It wasn't the greatest team that ever played the game. We lost about 7 games that year, but we won an incredibly important game. It's called Paarl Inter-Schools, where Paarl Boys High, the local opposition team, plays against Paarlgym. And in a town that size, not much bigger than Waterford, 30,000 people come to watch the game. Rugby in South Africa is religion, and rugby has changed radically since the professional era. You now have French clubs coming into schools where they supply a French teacher. They supply the programming, and all of those players are going to be taken out of South Africa to play in France and Europe. Currently, you have 500 of the best players in South Africa playing all over the world. That's what professionalism is, and you can see it by its results on South African rugby. You can see it. That's what it does to the sport. Maybe great for a few individuals, but desperate for the sport itself, desperate for the millions of people who follow it. So within that, I've also had the pleasure of working with tremendous athletes. It's Arno Farid, Paralympian gold medalist, Derby Milan. He's a cricket player, South African cricket player, also playing for England now, scored 140 in the Ashes. Jandre Kruger. I worked with Jandre Kruger, who played at a second division. Within 16 months, he became a Springbok from a second division outfit. And this guy, Thomas the Toy, is going to be the heaviest Springbok at 134 kilos. He will be a Springbok rugby player. These are some of the people I work with. Tumisang Madiba is a cage fighter from Kailicha, a huge township of 1 million people just outside Cape Town. Worked with him. So when you work with people, I work in the game. Not only do I work in the physical game, but I also work on the mental. They're very, if the body is right, I think Paddy O'Shea coined this, if the body is right, the mind's never too far behind. It's really true, because they go together a lot of the time. Mental toughness. What is mental toughness and tenacity? It's regardless. Mental toughness is regardless how difficult the circumstances are, you're able to perform at your peak and withstand any pain, physical or mental. So it's okay being able to do stuff in the gym. It's okay being able to do your stuff on the practice field, but can you perform it? Can you drive the nail through that thing when it really matters? Can you perform on the big day? There are many people who can do incredible things, but come the big day, it's a stretch is just too far, and they fall down. So, I mean, that's the area I really love to work in. I got asked by SASCOC, which is the governing body of sport in South Africa, I got asked to help with the World Games. The World Games are sports that have been in the Olympics or are just about to go in the Olympics. The sport of tug-of-war was in the first 5 Olympics. So, for instance, rugby sevens was in the World Games in Cali in 2013. It's in the Olympics now. I got asked to help with a women's tug-of-war team who shouldn't even have been there. They only got in there because another team was disqualified. I think the Chinese were disqualified, and they got in there. And I started working with this team from a strength and conditioning and mental perspective. It's a women's team. This woman here weighs 60 kilos. She can deadlift 150 kilos from the floor at a weight of 60 kilos. She couldn't do that the first day she did it, but by applying her mind and expecting, the expectation from the coach that went into her made her feel very uncomfortable in the beginning, is that she would do it. She couldn't see it, but the coach's job is to provide the vision whereby that she can do it, to provide her with the vision and to give her the belief that she can do it, and to break it up in small, manageable tasks on the way. While we were there, I'm bringing a team. I'm the high-performance coach to a sport. I don't know much about tug-of-war, even though it's quite big in Wexford, in Bowley. It's very big in parts of Ireland. It's quite big, but it's not my sport to know. It's not my position to know the technical aspects of the sport. I look after the athlete in the more holistic sense. If the athlete's mentally prepared, if the athlete feels good about themselves, if the athlete feels confident, if you don't feel it's too much of a stretch to do what they are doing. You'll see some of the people behind here. When we reached the stadium in Colombia, we started training with the Colombian team. It was a new team at the time, but we trained with them every day. None of the other teams, the Dutch or anybody, trained with them. We gave them time. We swapped jerseys with them. We did something to help them, to elevate them. And on the day, 120 students from the University of Cali came along, and in the middle of that stadium, they provided the impetus. And when 120 students start supporting you, they were followed by another 7,000 locals. So it was virtually a home game for us. So these are the things that you do. You're always, as a coach, you're always thinking, you're always trying to shift the odds slightly in your favor. And on that day, for the first time in 45 years, they did something amazing. But again, you've got to make it happen. The rugby sevens team. Sevens not a huge sport here. It's very big all over the world. Very big in South Africa. And I asked that team to come and help us. And that team traveled 2 hours on a bus to stand in a stadium and support a group of women that they will never see again in their lives. And on that day, they did the incredible. We won a medal for the first time, and supported by a group of players. And this group are the current world champions, and they're humble, they're grounded people. And that's why they came and spent a day with a group of people they'll never meet again. And you know what? That's why they're world champions, because of the culture. The culture is very, very important. The culture of humility, regardless of ability, that they're humble. In sport and in life, they say you either stay humble or eventually you're gonna get humbled. So while I was there, I always have an ear to the ground about athletes. And I'd heard about Luvo Manyonga. He lived in a township just outside Paarl, and I knew he was banned for taking crystal meth, which is anything but sports enhancing. So I'd heard about that, and I started asking around people in the Olympic movement, president and team doctors, etc. I started asking people, what can we do to help here? Because it seemed wrong, it seemed a little bit of an injustice. And the line is that if you work with an athlete who's banned, you also as a coach get banned. But maybe it's something Irish or whatever is in me. It seemed unfair. The odds weren't right. That it seemed unfair to cast a guy aside who had prodigious talent and to leave him to rot. And so I started looking for Luvo. And when you go to a township, it's not like you knock on the door and says, Luvo here, particularly if you're a 6'6" white guy and you come in looking for a black kid who's on crystal meth. No one's inclined to tell you where he is. And so it took me a while to find him, and I do have, I work quite a bit in the townships, along with the feats of strength that I do. I bend horseshoes, I tear decks of cards, break chains before my breakfast. These are the kind of things that I do, and I use it as I use it with sports teams, with individuals, with corporates, but also, Gandhi said to ignore poverty is just as bad as to cause it. And you can't live in a society where poverty is omnipresent and not do something to change that. And that's my way, using the strengths that I have to change that. That's what I do. So all of these guys are gang members. In all of the schools you go to around Eastern Paul, every child from 12 up is a member of a gang. They call it the numbers gangs, the 26s, 28s. And how ridiculous, eh? 26 will kill a 28 just because he's a number 28. It's absolutely incredible. In the townships of Paul, that's what it looks like. Yesterday, or the day before when I left Paul, it was 44 degrees. It was 5 when I landed here. 44 degrees. There's 70, 80,000 people packed into a tiny neighborhood. And the only people have ever helped that neighborhood is a guy called Niall Mellon. Everybody know Niall Mellon? And the Irish builders who came over and they built 600 houses in that township. That made a big difference to the place. And I'm also in there doing what I can to make a difference at that place. 44 degrees in a township. The best way to describe a place like that, or a shack like that, is a baking tin. Every year fires rip through the place. It could be 19, 20 people killed. It could be any amount. And that's what township is like. And people, it's very easy to judge people. They say he took tick, he was a drug addict or whatever. But if you live in a place where most of the people are unemployed, where there's no hope, lack of hope has to be the greatest killer of the human spirit that exists. And if there's one thing that I did was provide hope when I found Luvo and started working with him. What could I do? Arthur Ashe says, do what you can with what you have, where you are, standing where you are. And that's what I did. I have a gym in Paul. This is my gym. This is what it looks like. You'll notice there's no mirrors on the wall. There's nowhere where you can see yourself doing a nice bicep curl. That doesn't exist. It's a functional training facility. And there's nothing fancy about it. In fact, there's nothing fancy about training or becoming a super athlete. And all of these things should be kept to very, very basic levels. It's not rocket scientists. So we started there. We could start with the gym. He needed to get fit again. He needed to get strong again. Providing, they say you are those who you surround yourself with. So on the right here, this guy's name is Reich Nettling. I also work with him. We train together. He is a gold medal swimming athlete from the Athens Olympics, and he's actually C.J. Stander's brother-in-law. That's who he is. So that's on the right. We have that. On the left, we have Luvo. I want you to look at his body composition. Look what he looks like here. In the middle, we've got a guy who builds steel bars in his teeth. So with Luvo, we needed to get the guy power. We needed to give him some strength. We needed, with that. So we used to do maybe 50, 60. Has anybody ever used these machines? Yeah? They're not nice, eh? Yeah, it's called an assault bike, an appropriate name, where you pedal it and you push and pull as well. So your core works, your arms are pulling and pushing, and your legs are going all the time like the clappers. So there's no rest. There's no respite. But they're an amazingly effective, simple training tool for generating power and force. So we could train. We could surround him by a gold medal winner and speak into his life every day. People said, there's people who studied this from abroad, and they say, John, you did 3 major things with Luvo. And the first thing is that you were a real friend to Luvo. As a coach, you must be a real friend. That's a tough line as a coach, because if you only coach from the bottom level first, bottom level there's technique, On top of that, then there's tactics. I mean, a guy or girl must have basic technique. You must be able to bring tactics into the game. But at the higher level, you coach literally the spirit or the essence of the athlete. And if you cannot reach them there, you're not really changing the person's life. You're just producing an athlete. You might as well be racing a greyhound. Okay? You've got to be able to change the person. That's what we're in the game for. And by changing them, you change as well, because you're forced to adapt. Particularly in a team scenario, you're forced to adapt to that person. So that was the first thing, that I was a friend. The second thing is I believed, an important word for today, that I believed that he would do that more than my own ability to drive a 6-inch nail through 3 inches of wood. I believed, and I spoke it, and I created the expectation that you are going to stand on an Olympic podium, that you are going to be a magnificent, great long jump athlete. You're going to be the greatest long jump athlete that South Africa has ever produced. This is at a time when he's living in the township. This is a time when he's banned. This is at a time when he's still a tech addict, crystal meth, they call it tech locally. And I was speaking that into him. And that's what I believed. And that's the challenge of being a coach. And you can't say it fake, because athletes get you. They say 93% of communication is non-verbal. 93% of what they see in your eyes and what they will believe it. But you've got to believe it when you speak to them. So I believed him. And then the second and the last part is we spoke last night about creating structure, about putting scaffolding around his life. So it was a place he could train, athletes he could train with that were world class. It was a place where you could have breakfast. All of that were important things around his life, to creating these structures. So you can't just coach a person for 3 sessions a week and expect that they're going to come up and do stuff and say, that's not my problem. If you're having that's nothing to do. You leave at home. You come here, you focus on that. That sounds great, but it doesn't actually work. We've got to go beyond that. You've got to climb into that. You've got to be resourceful, and as a coach of the next generation, to be able to help people with those circumstances. So regarding planning, I thought it would be a great time as he was coming out of his band to make a trial for the Commonwealth Games, which were held in Edinburgh in 2014. He was ready. We were jumping. I had reacquainted him with his long jump coach, Mario Smith. They had split at one stage due to the addiction. And we got them back together, so we started training, and it was tough. It's a lot of time and a lot of investment to put into that. And we got him, so he met with Mario, they started training. Progress was made. Mario would drive from Stellenbosch to Paul 3 or 4 times a week, where they would jump and then train with Luvo. After 1 month, Mario got killed in a car crash instantly on his way. So it's a difficult scenario. So you're down now, we don't have a coach. We're down, not anybody. Adidas wouldn't give 1 pair of shorts. And now they're prepared to give millions. Not 1 pair of shorts they would give at the time. But do you give up or do you keep going? I sort of backed myself into a corner, I believe so much in it. But I kept going. I believed with everything inside me that this could be done. So we started training. Nobody would give a pair of spikes. I got a pair of spikes for him, but I didn't know there was a difference between running spikes and long jump spikes. A running spike's got metal spikes, long jump are softer. It's probably not a good idea to have metal spikes sticking in a board when you're doing long jump. Thinking back on it. But it seemed like a good idea. I don't know, did he know or not? I must ask him that actually. But he took them and smiled. And he jumped 8 meters 8. And he qualified for the Commonwealth Games. That was great. We were making progress. Things were coming right. You know, I knew that he was going to get a medal. I believed he could get a medal in the Commonwealth Games. You could use it for leverage. From there, you could go on to the next step. And we could get some resources coming in. 2 weeks after the jump, the governing body of SASCOC, or Athletics SA, lost the qualification jump. Truth is, the people didn't believe in him. The truth is, he was still viewed as toxic. So we're back to ground zero again. So do you give up, or do you keep going? You keep going. Such was the belief. Unfortunately, the Commonwealths never came true. In the middle of all of that, we're still having to work with a scenario where 400,000 kids in the Western Cape are smoking tuck. And once you smoke it once, it's almost, nothing's impossible, almost impossible to give it up. It's that addictive once you smoke it. So we're training, we're doing what we can. It's difficult times. You know, when it's 44 degrees, it's often difficult to make a decision, difficult to get out of bed. But we kept going. We kept meeting, we kept training, we kept talking. Most of my time with Luvo, I would say 90% of my time with Luvo, there was no strict coaching at all took place. As, in a sense, indirectly there was. I mean, it's relationship building and it's speaking into him in different ways. But the vast majority of the time, no coaching as you would understand it took place. A miracle happened in that there was a writer in the Boerland where we're from, and he was from the Guardian newspaper in Johannesburg, and he'd heard in the grapevine about this Irishman training this band black kid, long jumper, and he'd heard about it, and he'd heard about the mad training they were doing, and he'd heard a little, he got a whiff of the story, and he smelled his story there. And he wrote an article called The Impossibility of Loving Luvo. It's online. It's one of the great Luvo articles. There are many. This is one of the great ones, The Impossibility of Loving Luvo. And he wrote that article, and it had the effect of shaming the authorities into doing something. Luvo and I were called into Parliament. This article, newspaper article, was discussed in Parliament, and Luvo and I were called into Parliament to talk to the guys in Parliament. Called into a meeting, called into a room almost half this size, where you had to have a mic to speak to the person over there. So many people in it, and they were, they asked me, what do we need here? And I said, Luvo needs to be in a high performance center. He needs to be out of the current environment he's in, and he needs people that can treat him professionally. In a nutshell, it was a tough thing for me to say as a coach, because that meant me losing Luvo. That would be the beginning of the end of that type of the relationship. But sometimes that's what you got to do as a coach. You got to pass people on. Your coach is role is not to own people forever. You do what you can with them, and then you send them on, and you celebrate everything that goes after that. To qualify for the Olympics, I believed he was going to qualify. There was many good long jumpers in South Africa before that. We decided it was going to be a unique opportunity to come to Stellenbosch, all the ways from the north. It's 1,000 miles from Pretoria. So he flew down, and he was really focused. Why was he focused? Because his own family was going to be there. I was going to be there. So he was so focused, so ready, so determined. And on that day in Stellenbosch, he missed every single jump. All 5 jumps didn't even register 3 meters. Nothing. He was in the wrong space. For him, he doesn't need to be focused like John is when he's driving the nail. He needs to be in a different space. And that was the learning from that occasion. That everybody is different. That it's not like that famous Any Given Sunday speech that when you go in and you breaking hurleys off walls and stuff like that. That works for maybe 20% of the guys. They get that. But other 20% you're blowing away. You're putting them in the wrong headspace completely. You're putting the focus in too much, losing their peripheral vision. All of these things happen when you're at the wrong level of arousal. So he was at the wrong arousal level. So we had to change that. So from the greatest defeats, there was defeat after defeat. Churchill said that Not that I'm a great fan, but he said one of his famous quotes was, success in life is being able to go from failure to failure without ever giving up. And that's what we did. We went from failure to failure to failure, and we never gave up. So one of the learnings was headspace. He was in the wrong headspace. And I started to rethink, got to get him to rethink about the sport that he was involved in. I said, you're not actually an athlete in some regards. You're more like a performer. We spoke last night. I've seen Luvo jumping over a car lengthways. Try that. I've seen him do that. And I've seen him I said, you've got to be celebrate the sport, and you're more like an artist. The pit, which is from the corner of that stage all the way to Pat, is where you perform. That's your stage. So you've got to view that in a different way. And he did. He viewed it in a different way. And it took the pressure off him a different way. And he sort of brought his personality out somewhat then by changing a little bit how he thought about it. And with time running out, the very last competition, he qualified. He jumped 8:28. The one big jump in the last 4 or 5 years. The only big jump he's doing. He went to Rio as a complete, absolute no-hoper. He was ranked number 3rd of the South African athletes going there, but he was there. We were in Rio. And so I said, I continued the theme of becoming. I said, you're on stage, man. I said, you're going to be like a rock star in Rio. This is good. This is what you're here to do. This is what you were born to do. Celebrate. Be in that. In GA say, enjoy it. I meant you really, really have to enjoy it. People say enjoy it, and you go like, oh, come on. But he really did start to enjoy himself. And he was probably the only person in South Africa that made that particular tracksuit look good. Some people thought it was my tracksuit. On the morning of the event, your coach normally comes along, and somebody from the governing body as well, and you get accredited. You get brought to the stadium. On that morning, Luvo's coach got caught in a 3 or 4 kilometer traffic jam. He had to go get accredited and do everything on his own. Do his warm-up on his own. And as a coach, you can imagine if you weren't there and you let the team warm up on their own, how would they fare? And that was one thing that you've got to make your athlete be prepared for any eventuality, and you've got to make them know what they're doing themselves, know what his own warm-up is, know about this. It's a very technical sport because, if there's a headwind, tailwind, you've got to be able to make a judgment decision where you make your start from. You've got to make all sorts of, from that perspective, the speed which you approach is roughly the same speed as a 100-meter sprinter over that first 20 to 30 meters. So the accuracy, are you warmed up properly, how are you feeling, everything, none of that done. But on that day, Luvo did the incredible. And as we saw earlier, won a silver medal. And you can see that his body composition is slightly different from the guy that you saw earlier on, but he's still very athletic for his sport. And you can see that's him next to those horrible Linda McCartney designed tracksuits. But he did what he had to do, and he's done incredible things since. And if he stays doing what he's doing, he can be even more amazing. I said that was the only competition he didn't win in 2017. He lost that one. And so from me, an incredible journey. What a thing to be involved in. What a time of my life to be involved in that and to bring his swagger out in him, to bring his personality through, allow him to be himself, accept him for who he is, and bring that genius out in him. Not focus on what he wasn't, focus on what he was, focus on his brilliance, his genius, his amazement, and to expect the very, very best from him, to speak unbelievable but unimaginable things to him, personally, and privately, and in public. So I go on, I still have my gym in Paul, I still do talks like this all over the world, I still bend steel bars, and I'm This is the current group of athletes I'm working with. The athlete on the right is Junior Impofu. He's a neighbor of Luvo's. He's the current triple jump champion of South Africa. Valko van Wyk on the left, current pole vault champion. I don't know anything about pole vault or triple jump, but I got to know a lot about people and how to work with people. And that is what coaching is about as much as anything else. This message I want to get, that creating an expectation in both of their minds that they're going to be champions, that they're going to go and change the world. We've got 2 or 3 champions in Bekwani now. You know, poverty for me isn't just a financial thing. Poverty is a mental thing. And if you're in an environment where there's champions, is one of the brilliant things about GAA is that in every community there's champions. In every community, and they're down-to-earth, ordinary, approachable people, not like other sports. And when they shine, and the very fact that you know this guy, you grew up with him, he's a neighbor of yours, like neighbors of his, and they see that he's ordinary in every aspect of his life except for one thing. He's a triple jumper, he's a pole vaulter, he can be a hurler, he can be a footballer, but through sport is the vehicle of which we can change people and we can change society. And for me, that's one thing that's special about the GAA. Please don't lose that. That's the most important thing. When all the games are won and lost, you'll remember about the times that we had going to matches, playing, and words that were said to change our lives forever. That's the most important thing, you know. But by changing other people's lives as a coach, you go on and your own life is changed in the journey. I never knew that starting that journey with Luvo would have such an impact in my own life, but it's had a massive impact as well on my life. And to you as coaches as well, you cannot change another without absolutely changing yourself through the process. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. Thanks, Pat. Thanks very much, Peter. Thank you for having me, President. Thank you for being here. Thank you. Thank you.